Thank you so much for joining us for our Ocean View podcast. My name is Tori Roberts, and I am your engagement director. We are actually starting a series just kind of talking to staff about just their God moments in their lives and just the journey. So just thank you so much for coming along on this journey with us. So today, we are joined with Pastor Terry. We're so excited. We get to start with you.
Oh, wonderful.
So, I know, you have a laugh.
Yes.
So, we're just going to have a conversation about just kind of your story.
Okay, great.
And we would just love to hear just some things. I know you use lots of illustrations, but maybe this will be the backstory into those illustrations, just so we can get to know you a little bit better. Not that we don't already, but you know.
Yes. Let it all hang out.
Yeah. Oh, well, you know. So I guess an easy place to start is you tend to use baseball in most of your sermons, which is amazing and very relatable. But why don't you tell us kind of the backstory? Why? What is the backstory to your baseball illustrations?
Great question. I grew up in a family of baseball players. My dad played semi-pro baseball for the Philadelphia Athletics way back in the day. My brother actually got drafted by the Colorado Rockies and made it all the way to the spring training major league roster before getting hurt, and that sidelined his career. And then I played all the way up to college baseball and had an opportunity to play minor league baseball, but after watching my brother go through all that he had to go through to even get close enough to make it, I kind of made that decision with my health and with my future to say I have an opportunity to coach or I can try it. And I decided at that point that I was done, and my dad was not very happy with me, but it was the right decision for me to start coaching and then finish my education and get a job as a teacher and a baseball coach. So that was my first job.
Are there any tinges of like, oh, I could have done that, or just straightforward?
That's a great question. No, honestly, I think because of how my life turned out, and I know we'll talk more about that, I can literally see God's hand through that. And I loved being a teacher, and I loved being a baseball coach. And so there was no regrets whatsoever because, teaching is my passion. Pouring into the next generation is also a passion. So those two things just fulfilled right off the start. So no regrets.
Why don't you tell us a little more about, you've mentioned being a history teacher before, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I went to finish my degree at FIU, Florida International University, and called my former principal when I was a high school student. She was my principal, and she and I got along great, and she told me to call her whenever I needed a job. And so I got my degree and then went ahead and gave her a phone call. She said, "You're in." And so I became a baseball coach at MacArthur High School in Hollywood, Florida. And but also became the football announcer, the smoking cessation sponsor, you name it, I did it. I was young, I was energetic, and I just loved the students, and so it was really one of the highlight memories in my younger days of starting my career. I'm so blessed to have started my first formal job at that high school. Really, really enjoyed it.
How long did you teach?
I taught 2 years before God said no more.
Okay.
Yes, and so I didn't want to stop, didn't want to give it up. Absolutely loved the students, loved the school, loved what we were doing, and had no intention whatsoever of stopping.
Do you have a favorite moment from teaching? Like anything that stands out?
Yes. In today's day and age, I would have never been able to do it. I probably would have gotten sued. And so thank you that the statute of limitations are over. But I was one of those teachers where I grew up with coaches as teachers and loved every one of them, but there is a stigma attached to teachers who are coaches, and that is that they care more about their coaching than they do actually about teaching. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be that guy, and so I actually had my students call me Mr. Scalzetti when I was in the classroom and coach on the field because I did not want to confuse the two. And so I was really passionate about being creative about reaching the hardest students. So I had an American history class, and I had a like a majority of the football team was in that room. And they, could care less about school. They just wanted to be in football. And so finally one time I decided, how can I engage them? And so I created a review game called Review Football. And I told them all about it and said, tomorrow we're going out on the football field. But in order for you to succeed on the football field, you have to study your study guide. You got to make sure you know the answers. And I took our class out to the football field. And for the first time, the students that performed the best on the review were the football players. And the students who did poorly were actually the kids who always did well. Is because they had no interest in sports, so they didn't want to participate. But the football players, we went out there, I threw the ball around, I asked questions. It was so fun, and absolutely not the right thing to do in today's day and age, because if a kid had gotten hurt, I'd have been in big trouble. But back then, I didn't think about those things.
So was your goal to be a history teacher, or was your goal to be a coach and then you were kind of thrown into history?
My 30-year plan was to start at the high school level, receive a head coaching job as a high school coach, to be a history teacher, and to possibly ascend to like gifted, I wanted to, if you're a teacher, you want to ascend up the ladder. You start with the freshmen, you start with the students who, they're just excited to be at school and it's hard to wrangle them. But by my second year, I had really accomplished my 30-year plan, which was I wanted to be able to be a head coach of the high school, which I received. I wanted to teach gifted, which I was awarded the International Baccalaureate program, and I ran that program my second year and became head of the department. And then I wanted to ultimately coach and become a professor in college. And I was asked to begin my studies to be able to get my master's so I could be a teacher in college. And then I actually received a coaching job at the college level as an infield coach at the same time. So I remember at 2 years saying, I need to adjust my 30-year plan because this is it.
Yeah.
And that's what really started the process of me thinking about, does God have more in this life for me?
So actually that leads us into another topic. So talk us through what it was like for you to feel the call into ministry.
Never wanted to go into ministry. Had many friends. I was a Bible study teacher at my church. I was, a big part of we had a large church and we had a large singles group, and I was a big part of the singles group at the church, teaching, leading, doing men's groups, just hanging out with some really, really great people, and would get approached by my friends who would say, I think you should be a pastor. I think you should be a pastor. Never took it serious, never even thought twice about it, just kind of dismissed it. Wasn't even focused on it, to be honest with you. And so finally, after what led up to God really kicking me out of my job, was I had a friend who called me and asked, his name was Daryl, and Daryl called me and said, hey, can we go to dinner? And I said, sure. And we always went to dinner from time to time, you hang out with your friends. And he picked a restaurant that was about 45 minutes away from my apartment. And I remember driving out to this Chili's, and we had Chili's a block away. Yeah. And so finally I meet him there, and I'm like, did you have something going on out here? Why did you ask me to go here? He goes, no. He says, I drove 45 minutes too. I go, why in the world did you drive and make me drive 45 minutes to come meet you at Chili's? And he said, because I wanted to get your attention. And so I sat across from him, and he said, I've had this conversation with 4 other friends, and every time I've had it, it's come true. And you're the 5th. And I said, okay. And he said, Terry, I believe that God's called you to be a pastor. And I said, thank you, don't pray for me.
Oh.
And he smiled, he laughed, he goes, I know you're going to say that. He goes, and so he, for about 20 minutes, told me all the reasons why I should be a pastor. And I really honestly didn't listen to any of it. And finally at the end, he said, look, if you appreciate our friendship, the only thing I'd ask you to do is to start praying. And I said, fine, I'll pray, but don't pray for me. And he was like, okay. So I drove home, and it was very nice, but never thought anything about it. But then I started thinking, I want to honor my friend. And then I started thinking at the same time, I have a 30-year plan, and I've accomplished most of it in 2 years. And so, okay, God, maybe you're up to something. And so I prayed, and I got real with God. And for some of us, our prayer times are very different. I get very real with God, and it's as if he's right across from me. And I'm a straight shooter, so I just said, okay, God, you know my heart. You know that I have no interest in being a pastor. So if you want me to do this, I don't know how it's possible. So I'll tell you what, I'll pray three things. You got to confirm it this summer through friends. You got to then confirm it through a complete stranger. Bring him up out of nowhere, and you've got to have him come and tell me I should be a pastor. And then, God, even if you do those two things, right now you know my heart. I'm not going to do it. So then you've got to do the impossible, and you've got to break my heart. And I don't know if that's possible, but you got to figure out somehow to just break it, because I don't think I'm going to do it. So that was it. So I prayed. End of the school year, I got a call from my church, which was not unusual. And they said, hey, could you intern for the summer? Because I'm a teacher, 3 months off. Yeah. I said, sure, it's an extra paycheck, not a problem at all. And they asked me to go to.
That's how they suck you in.
That's how they do it. And so I went, and they asked me to go to student camp. And while I was at student camp, I was with a bunch of friends setting up for student camp in Ocala, Florida, right in the middle of Central Florida. And I had a bunch of friends tell me, hey, I knew you'd be a pastor. And I said, no. I'm just here for the summer. Don't, no, that's not what happened. And they laughed. They're like, no, we thought you'd become a pastor. I'm like, nope. I'm a teacher, baseball coach. And I thought to myself, well, God, that was easy. That's an easy one. So he confirmed it more through friends. Second thing, though, is he had to take a complete stranger. And that same day, as we were setting up for camp, I had a gentleman by the name of Barry Lethbridge. And Barry Lethbridge, never met him, didn't know him. His son, I think, was at the camp, and he was helping as a dad. And at the end of the camp, he just said, hey, he says, your name Terry? And I said, yes. He said, people told me about you. He said, do you mind going to dinner with me? So just a note, if you ever help at student camp and you're ever had student camp food, anytime someone says they'll take you off campus to a restaurant, you go.
Run fast.
Yes, you do it really quick. So he took me to Denny's. And I remember being at Denny's, and he sat across from me, and he said, tell me your story. So I told him about being a baseball coach and a teacher, and I'm just helping out for the summer. And he just looked at me puzzled, and then he said, it's interesting. He said, I don't know if this makes any sense, but the reason why I wanted to take you out is I thought you were interesting, but all day long, God kept prompting my heart to tell you that I think you should be a pastor. Does that make any sense to you? And I remember my jaw dropping, and I remember getting angry because I thought someone surely told him my prayer request. And I said, who told you? And he told me, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, let me tell you a story. So I told him, and he just looked at me and says, well, Terry, I don't know whether you should or not. I just am telling you what I felt God impressing on me and what I've seen. So that's for you to pray about, but I just wanted to let you know. And I said, thank you. And that's when God got my attention. And that's when I started going, okay, that's 2 out of 3. But I had an ace in the hole. He has to break my heart. Hasn't broken my heart. Nothing to it. Fast forward a few days later, we're in the middle of the camp, and the camp pastor, his name was Bill Cornelius. I'll never forget it. He was from Texas. He was speaking to our students, and we were, as leaders, were in the back room taking a break because, once someone takes your kids, you're like, okay, I can breathe. So we're all in the back. No one can see us, and Bill's with all the kids, and he's preaching to them. And right in the middle, in an awkward moment, one of those moments where you hear silence and you're like, what happened? Mm-hmm. And we were ready to run into the room and ready to check and see what went on. Bill stopped and said, I'm sorry, this is awkward, but I've been all night long, I've been communicating and talking, and God's been telling me to do something, and I've been fighting him on it, but I need to stop. God's been telling me that I need to stop right now, and I need to say this. And before he said the words, Tori, I knew what he was going to say. My heart started pounding a mile a minute, and he said, somebody here is fighting the call to being a pastor, and you need to stop fighting, and you need to give your life to the ministry. At that moment, my heart broke. At that moment, I burst into tears. My wife would tell me I'm a crier. But back then, I was not a crier. Yeah. And a good friend of mine, I fell into his arms. He grabbed me and he said, what's wrong? What is going on with you? And I said, I think God has called me to be a pastor. And he said, well, it's about time. And there's more to it. And God confirmed it 3 more times that week in miracle ways, to where I finally called my fiance at the time, who became my wife, Jennifer. And I told her, I can release you from our vow of commitment to one another because you agreed to marry a teacher and a baseball coach. And God's called me to be a pastor, so I don't expect you to go on that journey with me unless you want to. And thankfully, she said she would. And that began the journey of becoming a pastor.
Wow.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to somebody that's exploring that option?
There's the age-old question. I think a lot of people know this, but it was told me, if you're thinking about going into ministry and you could do anything else and be happy and be passion-filled, go do whatever it is beside ministry.
Why?
Ministry's hard.
Yes.
Ministry is difficult, and we people will look at pastors and they just see the wow, people respect them, or people don't respect them, depending on your history and what happens. But ministry is living the handful of life-changing moments that people live through. It's almost like our wiring is, we are just wired enough to handle those life-changing moments a few times. And then mentally, emotionally, we have to kind of absorb it, and then we get a break. When you're a pastor, you're living everyone's life-changing moment. So when you multiply 5 lifetime moments that a normal person would usually be involved with, and then you make that 5 into thousands, you begin to understand the mental stress and the toll it takes on a minister or a pastor. And unless you understand that, and unless you are prepared for that, there's a reason why when students graduate seminary and go to a church, within, I believe the stat is within 2 years, 3 out of 4 pastors quit the ministry and leave the ministry. It's because they're not ready for that.
What would your advice be to those that are in that moment or looking at it realistically? What advice would you say? How do I protect myself from that burnout? How do I protect myself from the overwhelm?
It is, well, I would say this. Number one, it's not going to be perfect because ministry is messy and it's 24/7. However, there are things that you can do to be able to make it manageable. And one of the first things that I did was with my wife, Jennifer, is I set up and guarded our Fridays and Saturdays. I guarded them for only emergencies. And so I'll say this, when I first came here to Ocean View, that wasn't the norm of the culture of the church. Yeah. And I remember there were a few people that when I first arrived, and they would call me on a Friday, and I wouldn't answer the phone, and they would leave a message, but it wasn't an emergency, and I would on Monday contact them back. They were very, very upset because I didn't immediately call them back. And it's because they didn't understand that if I didn't set those boundaries, and if I didn't make everyone understand that, hey, I have a family, and unless it's an emergency, I'm going to invest in my family on Fridays and Saturdays and give them that time. That some people understand that, some people don't. Yeah. But you, as a young minister, you've got to carve out that space.
What else? I mean, you sort of just talked about it a little bit, but what else do you do consciously to protect your family and guard them? Because I know, I mean, a lot of people don't understand that. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, a few things. Number one, I've got to make sure that I don't just have my ministry walk with God. I have to make sure I have my personal time with God.
That's great.
And that's separate from studying for any messages. That is just, all right, God, I'm going to do a devotional. We're doing the Recap Bible as a staff and as a church. And so I do the Recap Bible every morning, and I take that time and I soak in that time. So that energizes me for the day. The other thing that I will typically do to be able to guard those things, and I don't want to forget your question with regards to it, but a lot of times shaping the, and I'm sorry, Tori, I got lost on what your question was.
So that's how you protect yourself. So I feel like a lot of people feel the pressures of ministry and it kind of seeps into their home. I mean, as a PK myself.
Good.
So as a PK myself,
Yep.
I feel like you do a very good job of this. You do protect your family and put guardrails around them. Yeah. So maybe explain that process and what you actively do, because I feel like a lot of maybe church members may not understand that. Like, why do I guard my family?
That's good. So I have a deal with my wife, and I break it all the time. But I have a deal that if I'm going to share an illustration that involves her or involves Connor, that I'm going to talk to them beforehand. And if I don't, I have have to pay them $5.
Nice. Love that deal. Yes. I wish I had that deal.
Yes, you of all people should have had that deal. But
be a millionaire right now.
When my son Connor was a real young age and kind of oblivious to all things, I would use a lot of illustrations because he just didn't even know any better. But as he started getting of age and started getting to where he understood and people would come talk to him, I stopped using as much illustrations about him. And that was basically to protect my relationship with him. Only if I saw something, I would ask him. I would never say something about him unless he really knew it. Jennifer was the same way. In order to protect our home, we're very transparent. But at the same token, there is life. And some things, a pastor can blurt it out on stage and think nothing of it. And then all of a sudden, you don't realize the personality of your family is different than you. So I try to put guardrails around what I will say, illustrations I use. And then at the same token, here's a tip that I tell not only most pastors, but also anybody who works in the business field. If you answer phone calls that are not emergencies at dinner with your family or at times when you're with your family, what you're saying to your family is that they're not as important as your business. And what you're saying to the people who call you is, I'm available whenever you want me. So in order to guard that time and train individuals, I'm not going to call Terry because he normally doesn't pick up at this time anyway. In order to create that, you've got to develop a habit that is a healthy habit for your family. And so those are some of the things that I do. I really try to guard our family time a lot because when you're a minister, and it's wonderful. If you're a people person, it's wonderful. Everybody wants to stop and talk to you, and you love it. But the hard part is that in order to get that break and to recharge your batteries, you've got to have a safe place. And if you allow people to seep into your safe place, that's usually when burnout occurs.
Yeah. Well, and I personally love that you understand your wife to the point that you allow her to use her gifts and talents. Like her talents are in that kids ministry and helping our kids director be organized, and she's amazing at that. And I have such utmost respect for the fact that she doesn't have to sit down front, and that you really utilize her in her gifting.
Well, that goes to what we do as a staff team too. Everybody has gifts and talents, and the problem is that we have traditions in the church, and we try to take every personality and force them into a tradition. And the problem is that some pastors' wives love being out front, love being in front of hundreds of people, and they fill that role well. Some pastors' wives, they're not upfront individuals. My wife, Jennifer, now, believe it or not, she can do a great job in front of people. She has the talent to do so. But she much prefers the one-on-one relationships, and she's passionate about preschoolers. So why would I, as a pastor, take my wife out of her passion and move her into a role that doesn't suit her? And so when I came here to Ocean View, that's one of the first things that I said, is to make sure and say to her, you can absolutely continue to do the role that is important for you.
That's awesome. I love that. And I do feel like part of that is safeguarding your family, really. So let's switch gears a little bit. One of the other illustrations that you use a lot is talking about growing up in the Catholic Church.
Yep.
So maybe can you tell us a little bit more about that, and then how you transitioned out?
That's great. Grew up in the Catholic Church, served Mass 6 days a week as an altar boy. I was the captain of the altar boys. And
so for those of us that don't pretend that I don't understand anything that you're saying, what does that mean?
So an altar boy is kind of like when you're growing up in a Catholic school, you have the opportunity as a boy to be able to assist the priests in the worship service.
Okay.
They call it a Mass. And when funerals are had, you assist the priests in the funerals. You participate. And so you're trained.
So this is a big honor.
Oh, it's a big honor.
Okay.
And, it doesn't mean you're going into ministry. It just means that when you're a young age, you help out. So 6 days a week was a lot.
That's a lot.
But I used to do it because a friend of mine and we used to get up early and we used to go do it. And that ultimately they allowed me to start training others to be able to be an altar boy. So I was committed to the Catholic Church far more than most people were. However, there comes a point in most Catholics' lives where because of the style of the Catholic Church, which there's parts of the Catholic Church that I absolutely adore and I absolutely love to this day.
Which is?
There's a lot of tradition, and there's the sanctity, and there is what's a word for it? But some of the sacredness of the Catholic Church and the reverence of the Catholic Church is, I think, is missing at times in non-denominational Baptist, evangelical type churches. I believe that the Catholic Church has that down. You know, the awe of God is really important in those. But the individual study and knowledge of the Scriptures is not really highlighted in the Catholic Church. And so, at least not my Catholic Church. And so when I was growing up and going to college, I remember I came to a point where life was getting difficult, responsibilities were changing, and all of a sudden I was reaching for the answers of life. And I grew up in Catholic Church my whole life. I didn't have the answers that I saw friends who had them. So in other words, I reached for my religion, and it really didn't help me. And at our church, which you know, I say to individuals, there comes a point in your life where you have to transition from owning your parents' faith or your pastor's faith or your priest's faith, and you've got to own your own faith. And the only way you can own your faith is by studying the Word of God, researching it for yourself. Don't trust me. Don't trust a pastor. That's a that is a lot of faith to put your life in the hands of someone that you don't really know well. Instead, God gives us His Word to be able to investigate for ourselves. And I believe everyone has a responsibility to really dive in and understand their faith at a different level. And at our church, I think that's why many people are coming to our church, is because they want to, for the very first time, really grasp and understand the Scriptures in a way that applies to their lives.
Yeah. So how old were you when you exited?
I was about 18 years old.
Wow.
18 years old.
Was there a moment other than, or was it a slow roll?
It was a moment. I remember being, and I tell this story in our church all the time, so I'll be brief, but college baseball player, received the scholarship, and the coach that was there, he was going through a difficult time. For whatever reason, he and I were like oil and water. And I was always respectful, and he would tell you this to this day. But because of what he was going through, he decided to, in essence, put a target on my back. And so no matter what I could do, I felt more and more pressure from him. And so that pressure equated to poor play. Poor play then equates to being a teammate on a team where people then begin to judge you, begin to make fun of you because you're not performing at a certain level. And that pushed me to a point where I felt all alone and isolated and angry at God. And when you get to that point, you look up at God. And again, I reached for my religion going, how do I get through this? And I didn't have any answers. And that's when someone told me a long time ago, if you need the peace of God, call upon Jesus, call on Him as Lord and Savior, and He will bring you peace. So I remember not knowing anything, saying, all right, God, I'll make you a deal. I will study your word and learn and own my faith for the next month. Two chapters every night I'll read, and I'll try and understand it. But here was the prayer. If you can change me and bring me peace, do it. And after 2 weeks, I remember getting on my knees. I remember my eyes being opened. And I remember seeing what Jesus did for me for the first time in a different way. And that began a year of amazing spiritual investigation on my part, understanding the Word, understanding differences between what I grew up with and what the Word actually says. And I began investigating the differences and talking to Catholic priests and asking them questions. And at the end of that year, I had grown exponentially in my faith. And that's what really led me to make a choice at that time to be able to investigate going to an evangelical church. And at that point, it was a Baptist church in Fort Lauderdale.
Was that scary?
Yes, because I thought my dad was going to kill me.
Okay.
Because if you know Catholicism, it's usually a very strong family religion. And anytime you decide to go a different route, it's really upsetting to the family. Understandably, it's very, very upsetting. They're concerned. They want to know what's going on. So that was what my dad was, and concerned for me. But I'm thankful that I did. Again, this doesn't speak for all Catholicism. It just speaks from my experience. And at my Catholic church, I knew it was the best decision for me to be able to investigate on my own.
What would you advise somebody that's searching?
I would say this. We are responsible. At the end of the day, if we were to stand before God, we've got to be able to give an account and understand and know and answer a simple question. If God were to look at us in the eye and go, why should I let you into my kingdom? If we don't have the answers to that, then I would say we have a lifetime to learn and understand the grace of God, the gift of God, and then the responsibility we have with that gift. And if individuals listening to this don't even understand what that is, we have to begin owning our faith, especially if you call yourself a Christ follower, because that's the essence of our life, is understanding we have a God that wanted to restore our relationship with him, who sent his son to die for our sins so that we could be reunited with him, so that we could live a fulfilled and passion-filled life to glorify him while we're here, so that we then in eternity can live with other believers glorifying God, because he created us. He made us for relationship with him.
Yes. So let's go a different direction now. So one of the other things you've talked about a lot is like my dad, you lost your mom in high school. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why don't you just tell us a little bit about that journey?
Very difficult. My mom was a kindred spirit with me. Most families, you grow up with siblings, and some connect more with individuals than others. My mom and I were lockstep. I was the youngest, and my dad was usually with my brother, who was the oldest, and he was playing baseball ahead of me. So my dad was usually, the first child. You're always going through those experiences with that first child, helping them through it. So my dad was on the baseball field and helping him while I was growing up. My mom usually was the one at my games, and she was usually one transporting me. And so we developed a very close relationship, and our personalities were very similar too. And so we were much alike. And when I remember driving home from a baseball game and my mom turning and crying and looking at me and telling me that she found out she had cancer. And I'll never forget that drive. I know where I was in Miami, Florida, driving down I-95. I'll never forget it. And that began a year of mess. A year of helping my mom, bringing a pan next to the bed as she's getting radiation treatment and coming home and throwing up because her esophagus is burned.
Yeah.
And going through those as a young, 13 and 14-year-old, and you mature very quickly.
Yeah.
You begin to, it's a blessing at one side because you're forced to mature, but also you're saved from some of the immaturities of life. And I know that sounds weird, but truly those years, which are formative years, and you can make really dumb decisions as teenagers, instead of me focusing on what party I was going to go to on a Friday night, I was focused on how can I help my mom. And right, wrong, or indifferent, that's sad in one essence, but I look at it as, one of those blessings of God to be able to share those moments with her. And she made it to remission, and everything was great. And as I was sharing with the team this morning, I remember on May 4th, back in 1990, May 4th, 1990, I was told, I don't think Mom's going to come home from the hospital this time. And I remember that was hard. And I remember her disintegrating before my eyes in a week.
Wow.
And she was, up talking, and those that know cancer and how quickly cancer can take you, a week later, she was gone. And that was hard to process. I buried it, didn't really deal with it very well. But there's a principle that I tell people. There's post-traumatic stress disorder, and then there's post-traumatic growth disorder. And 3 out of 4 individuals will go through growth disorder. 1 out of 4 will go through post-traumatic stress. And thankfully, I went through the growth disorder, which is you're forced as a 15-year-old kid to become an adult. Yeah. And it's either sink or swim. So my dad became a single dad. My house became very different. I remember, I'll share this quick story. I remember the first day that we were home and I was back at school. Bless my dad. I remember I came home from school and my mom always made dinner. My dad never cooked. Yeah. And so I remember coming home and there was this big greasy steak, boxed mashed potatoes, and it was a mess. And it was just my dad and I. And so we sat at the table and we ate the steak. And then the next day I came home and guess what was on the table? A big greasy steak and boxed mashed potatoes because my dad didn't know how to cook anything else. And so I remember looking at my dad and saying, Dad, I appreciate this. He goes, do you want to go out to eat? I go, let's go out to eat. And so, so that was a special time too for my dad and I.
Was it just the two of you?
It was just 2 of us. My brother had gone to college at that point, and so and he had a difficult time because you can imagine 18-year-old kid going to college and going through that experience was hard.
Yeah. How how is it for you? Because I know, so I'll share a little bit of my family history. For my dad, he really struggled even to this day with hospitals and things like that. What is that like for you, having walked a very similar journey?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever answered this from anybody. Good question, Tori. I don't have a phobia of hospitals. I'm very comfortable in hospitals now because once you live through that,
Right.
you are. When I was in South Florida and I was ministering, I used to have to go to that hospital that my mom
Yeah.
died. And so that was difficult, walking through the same hallways
Yeah.
to minister to people. That was hard. But going to hospitals is not a problem for me. I actually don't mind it at all. I enjoy that part when I have time. I enjoy that part. I will say, I think what that affected me, though, is the process of death is difficult still for me because
Yeah.
walking through tragedy with someone, the sad part is I'm very experienced at it because
Yeah.
I've had to do it a lot. But that is not something that I enjoy. I don't think many ministers enjoy that.
Yeah.
But I do find myself shielding myself from those experiences because it brings up a pain that is deeper than
Yeah.
if you've not gone through it.
Yeah.
And so that is something that is difficult at times to walk through. But as most guys are, when you're in. And so, like, if I'm in it with them. But when you're on the fringes and you're outside, it's hard to engage because it's difficult.
Yeah. What do you have, having walked that journey, do you have any advice for people that are coming alongside those grieving?
Yes. You don't have the answers. Most men are fixers. Most ministers are fixers. In that moment of tragedy, your job is to be quiet. Your job is to just be there. Just put your arm around them, cry with them, hug them, hold them. Don't say anything. It's very difficult for me or for most ministers to do that because we want to encourage. We want to tell them in a moment everything's going to be okay. No, life at that moment is terrible, and
Yeah.
life on this earth. That's why Jesus came. It at times is terrible, and so rather than trying to fix it up and make it better, we should just come around, put our arms around someone, and love them, and just be there. And what can you do? That sometimes means going grocery shopping for them. That means putting an app on their phone and helping them figure it out. There's a lot of different ways you can minister to someone. You don't always have to have the right word to make it better.
Yeah. Would that same advice stand for somebody that's caregiving for somebody that's struggling with cancer?
Yes.
Okay.
Just being there with them and supporting them and showing up. They're going to tell you don't show up. And you don't have to show up long because sometimes those moments are difficult. But just showing up, dropping something off, bringing food by, bringing a flower by, letting them know that you're thinking of them, texting them, letting them know you're praying for them. Those are the moments that matter. And some people love company. Some people are more private. But just letting them know that you're thinking of them matters.
Yeah, that's great. So let's switch gears one more time. We've talked about lots of things, but let's go back to just kind of experience as a lead pastor. This is not something that the rest of us have experience with. So let us know what is that like? I mean, or maybe first let's talk through what different areas of ministry did you work in to get to this point? Which I know is a lot.
Yeah. Really quickly, I was one of the weird guys. Typically, you're student pastors. Typically, as a pastor, you grow up and you become a student pastor, and then from student pastor, you usually grow into being a lead pastor. I took a different route. I basically have held every role in the church. I even sang and led worship.
Women's
a few
ministry?
times. I actually led women's ministry. I actually led divorce care, even though I've never been divorced. I led a single parent ministry, and I was never in a single parent ministry.
No, but you lived in a single parent household.
I did live in a single parent household. And so preschool pastor, elementary, middle school, high school, I've done all those roles. And I thank God for that because, and you know this, Tori, being on our staff team, there's not many situations that come up in the staff meeting where I'm speaking out of turn. In other words, I'm speaking from no experience. It's typically going back to a place or an experience where, okay, I've dealt with this. This is what I did. Doesn't mean that this is what you should do, but what's the principle between of the experience? And that, as a lead pastor, has suited me really well because it's helped me to be there for our team, to be there to be able to, when they're throwing their hands up and scratching their head saying, it's not working. It's helpful to be able to come alongside of them and to be able to say, okay, so I've done this before. Let's look at the principles and let's talk about it. Where a lot of lead pastors, many times they have to trust individuals because they don't know. Or what's worse, many lead pastors will bring their opinion to the table without any experience. And the problem is and you know this, like worship ministry is the one that I don't have the most at. And so I give the most trust to the worship ministry because what do I know? And so I'm not going to tell you to change that key or I'm not going to do that because I don't know. And so there's a lot of level of trust in that. But it has helped me. It has served me well to have that experience.
What do you feel like, if you look at the church as a whole, what has changed? It feels like there's been a lot of shift. Because you've been doing it and you have served in lots of areas. What are some of the shifts that you've seen?
We have a gap in the ministry field. Now the good news is recent trends. There's life being poured, renewed in.
Yes.
But for a lot of years, especially the last several years, there's been a gap in individuals wanting to be in the ministry. And COVID played a lot in that. Politics have played a lot in that. The world has been difficult. And so you've got a generation coming into ministry now who they're excited now about being a part. But because of that gap, there are many individuals, especially Gen Z, that the ministry basics that were passed along generation, decade to decade, there's a gap in that education.
Wow.
And so right now, all the statistics point, I just taught at a conference about this, all the statistics point to we've got to get back to the basics and help, and there's a big term, we don't necessarily need to model, we need to now mentor. Because there are a young generation that don't want you to know that they don't understand the principle, and sometimes they don't know the questions to ask.
Right.
And we are over going, well, this is obvious. This is Ministry 101. Of course you know this. No, they don't. And it's not their fault. We just have a gap in that education process. And so there's a big movement among mentors and leaders to go back to 101 ministry and to be able to help the younger generation understand the principle of people. And how do you engage them? How do you make them, excited about learning more about Jesus? Those are the simple things, but the simple things have gotten lost.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have ever thought of that, but yes, that would make sense.
Yeah.
So talk to us, like we're talking about the future of church. Talk to us about the future of our church. We've got big things on the horizon. Maybe why it's so interesting. I feel like God has led us here, and it's fun. I mean, I think it's one of those hindsight will be 2020 on why now.
Yeah.
But if you could let us know why you think God says now for a second campus.
I think it's very obvious. I didn't want it. It's really simple. Just like I didn't want to be in ministry when COVID hit. I remember when COVID hit, looking at God, going, people would come up to me like, "Boy, you seem very calm about this." And I said, "Yes, because I didn't want this." And God knew COVID was coming, and God knew I'd be in this position. So it's easy for me to look at God and go, "All right, God, you got this because I didn't want this, so you're going to have to come through." And that's how I've approached ministry. And I did not want, nor was I looking to add a second campus at the time that all of this happened. And so I remember sitting on it. I remember going to our leadership team, and our church leaders, they were the ones who actually said, no, this absolutely is of God. We need to do this. So we have been prepping as a church staff and going through a lot of work to prepare our church to become two. And that's difficult. That's organically, that's difficult. Financially, that's difficult. All the things that happen. And so the future for Ocean View right now is to continue to serve Myrtle Beach in this location and be Ocean View and be the culture of this church to so many new people who are moving close to this church. But while at the same token, God's gifted us a privilege that most churches don't have, which is to be ready to expand the ministry and to be able to go out in Conway and to be able to bring to a new area and new families and bring God's word in a hopefully exciting and new way to many of them to be able to reach them. And so this is a transformational moment in the history and the life of our church. It's not easy. It's difficult. There's a lot of pressures. There's a lot of stresses. There's a lot of commitments and responsibilities. But I can promise you, it's not a surprise to me that God chose this time, because I can't think of a sweeter time in the life of our church with regards to the spirit of our church. And our people are just excited about it. And I'm excited. I'll be giving the church an update very shortly. And so I'm excited about some of what God's doing.
So as we close, what would one piece of advice be to anybody looking to just deepen their walk with Jesus? What would one piece of advice be that you would give to somebody?
I've just, in my study time recently, I think it starts with quieting your spirit. I think we're distracted.
Yes.
I think the enemy wants us to be distracted. And life distracts. Relationships distract. Pressures distract. Our pride distracts. And meanwhile, we're running around like chickens with our head cut off. And we're getting, frustrated. We're getting stressed. We're running from thing to thing. And we feel fulfilled. Because if you're a doer like I am, and you're about a task-oriented person, you busy yourself. I accomplish this. I accomplish this. I accomplish this. I feel good about myself. But meanwhile, it's all a distraction. And so I would say to an individual wanting to deepen their faith, you've got to get quiet. You've got to, and two things. One, I would recommend just pausing in an attitude of prayer and talk to God. Just pause. I'll share this one quick story. I remember sitting with a group of guys, and we were going to spend time in prayer. A bunch of college guys praying, weird. But we wanted to experience a time of prayer and just meditate and just silence. And we started. And after about 45 seconds, it was painful. All of a sudden, the phone started ringing. And all of us looked up and we're looking at each other. And then I'll never forget, it's a friend of mine, Jeff Crick. Jeff ran over, grabbed the phone, and he couldn't shut it off. And so he opened the refrigerator door and he threw the phone in the refrigerator and he shut the door. And I've used this from time to time. Sometimes you have to put the phone in the fridge. Sometimes you just have to get yourself to a place where there's no distraction. And so that's one. One, quiet, talk to God. No schedule, no method, just talk to him. And then secondly, I would say, you got to begin to own your faith by opening the Word of God. You've got to, and I would recommend anybody who hasn't started, don't start with us in the Recap Bible. Don't do that to yourself. Instead, what I would say is open the New Testament and go to the Gospel of John. Just read the book of John. And if you want to read the rest of the Gospels, you can. But start in the book of John, read a chapter or two at night, and just meditate on it. Pray about, what did I just read? And realize this, where it changed for me is the people that you're reading about, when you begin to understand that the people that Jesus chose to do the things he did for, it's not the people in the Bible, it's you. And so when you can put yourself in the shoes of the people that God saved, that's when it clicks. That's when your faith deepens, because you're reading a love story, not a history story. You're reading a love story that God wrote long ago so that you could find it and know who he is in your life.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Tori.
And thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Ocean Views Podcast. We hope that you will join us next time. Go ahead and follow us and subscribe on our YouTube channel so you can get notifications when we post our next one. Thanks.